But I'm going to go ahead and move on because today we've got the good stuff coming, right? We have Dr. Darcy Hutchins with us, and we are so excited and so glad that she's here. Dr. Darcy Hutchins has a PhD in education policy from the University of Maryland, College Park, and is a director of family, school, community partnerships for the Colorado Department of Education, for CDE. She provides support to districts to implement family partnership programs for student success, particularly through parent participation in school and district accountability committees. In her role at CDE, Dr. Hutchins staffs the State Advisory Council for Parent Involvement in Education, called SACPI. She also teaches in the School of Education at the University of Denver, go to you, and she serves on various advisory boards. So without further ado, let's all give Dr. Hutchins, Darcy, a really warm welcome. Yay! And Darcy,
I'm a little distracted right now, Sandra, seeing that there was a Packers fan, Adam. As somebody who grew up on the North Shore of Chicago, I take offense to that, but I will try not to let it cloud my judgments moving forward. It's so great to see so many people on this call, in the Zoom, and what a great way to spend a sunny, at least it's sunny here in Denver, finally today, a sunny Friday morning. I am going to have the chat sort of minimized on my page just so I don't get distracted. So somebody from Crush, please feel free to unmute and let me know if something comes up in the chat. I'm going to go back and forth. And I need to apologize in advance before I officially get started that I get super excited talking about family, school, and community partnerships. I started my career as a first grade teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, and I'm going to tell a story later about that. But ever since the first day that I walked into that building before the kids even came back to school, I knew that family, school, and community partnerships were going to be the best part of my job as a teacher. And I would have no idea back then that, 20 years later, I would be here in Colorado with the opportunity to work with districts across the state. So I feel very fortunate for the experiences that I've had. But if I seem too excited about it, just know it's because it's like literally my life. I believe you're going to get a copy of these slides. Is that accurate? Okay, good. So you'll see there, I linked both my email address as well as the homepage for the Office of Family, School, and Community Partnerships. I have a lot to cover today, so bear with me as I try to squeeze it all in, and know that I will be coming back to a lot of these slides during week 6 of the ECHO series. So I do have a quick Slido for us. So if you can use your phone and put it up to the QR code or go to slido.com, #FSCP. If for whatever reason you can't access the Slido, feel free to also use the chat. But what words come to mind, what phrases come to mind when you think about family, school, and community partnerships? I'm looking the pig on the shelf behind me. I'm looking, Virginia. Oh, the pig, the plant. That's new. I'm not used to that being behind me. I'm growing some baby spider plants. And so I actually just put that there yesterday. So sustainable, good, meaningful relationships, mental health, essential. Good, keep them coming, working together. Necessary. It looks like I'm in the right place. I was honestly expecting like challenging, difficult. How do we do this? Essential, but with challenge. Yes, absolutely. We'll take maybe 10 more seconds. Like a lot of relationships, same goals. I love that. I'm seeing a lot of people saying sustainable, challenging, and messy. Yes. Agreed, but also worth it. Fun. I'm glad somebody said fun. High impact. I'm wondering if some of these things are coming from my CDE people who are here, who have heard me talk about this so much. Perfect. So Elaine, or not Elaine, well, Elaine, you haven't seen this either, but Carla actually has not seen this slide. I'm glad, Carla, that you mentioned equity in the objectives, because I always like starting presentations with this quote from two of my former colleagues at Johns Hopkins University, Joyce Epstein and Steve Sheldon. And they said that the purpose of implementing programs of family, school, and community partnerships should be to promote and help realize equity within our educational system, alongside attention to improving student outcomes. And it's really important that we stay grounded in equity and realizing that family, school, and community partnerships can help create more equitable educational opportunities for students. But also, the whole reason that we want families, schools, and the community working together is ultimately for positive student outcomes, both academic focus as well as non-academic, more behavioral. Now, what do we mean when we say family, school, and community partnerships, or FSCP, as you may hear me say later? And I'm going to actually ask my colleague, Stephanie Monhay, who is a relatively new family, school, community partnership program specialist in the office at CDE, to read the definition. So this is how the Colorado Department of Education, with input from stakeholders across the state, this is how we define FSCP. So Steph, do you mind reading it for us?
Yeah, of course. Definition: families, early childhood programs, schools, and communities actively partnering to develop, implement, and evaluate effective and equitable practices to improve educational outcomes for children and youth.
Awesome. Thank you, Steph. Yeah. And so I really want to point there, I'm looking at the definition on my phone, that we're talking about actively partnering. So this is an active thing. It's not passive. It doesn't just happen by accident. It's intentional. We're talking about effective as well as equitable practices. And the whole reason, again, why we're partnering together is to improve educational outcomes for children and youth. And this is a P through 12, preschool through 12th grade program. So these are some of the buzzwords and topics and trends that you will see in current research about family, school, and community partnerships. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I really want to stress first that we need to be thinking beyond random acts of partnership. So when you think about FSCP, the first activities that often come to mind are parent-teacher conferences, your back-to-school nights, maybe a fall festival, some potlucks, fundraisers. Those are all fine things to do. However, if we really want to maximize FSCP to be a school improvement strategy, so helping us think more proactively about partnerships rather than reactive, we want to make sure that we're moving beyond those random acts to instead have a systemic, scalable, sustainable partnership program in our schools. Family, school, community partnerships is the most, I'm not even going to say one of the most, it is the most thrifty school improvement strategies that you can implement in your schools. So my, again, former colleagues at Hopkins, they've done hundreds of studies about this topic. And now keep in mind, what I'm about to tell you is using 2017 dollars. So you'd have to adjust a little bit for massive inflation, right, in 2022. But what they found in studying schools of all different sizes, of all different levels from across the United States, is that per pupil expenditure for family, school, community partnerships at the school level is $15 to $24 per pupil. And that covers all expenses of activities. It covers potential staff. So on average of the schools in these studies, $15 to $24 per pupil per year. So I want you to keep that in mind too, as you're thinking through, activities and really, is it worth investing in FSCP in your schools? The answer is absolutely yes. So this is the what of FSCP. And then we go into the why. Why is it even important that we take the time, and it does take time, to make sure that schools, families, and the community are all partnering together. So we know that there are positive outcomes for students, that there, higher graduation rates, fewer discipline problems, higher achievements. We also know that there are positive outcomes for families, feeling more ownership in the school, that they have an increased capacity to help their children's learning at home. We also know that teachers experience positive outcomes. They, in several studies dating back to about 1997, I believe, teachers have said that one of the greatest factors that determine whether or not they stay in their current school are the relationships that they have with family and the community. And we also see that over and over on Colorado's TLCC survey, which I'm putting a plug in for my colleague Lisa Steffen. Make sure to take the TLCC survey. It launched on the 19th. So I wasn't even planning on doing that, but it's a good plug. So this slide talks about the overlapping spheres of influence. And this is a theoretical model dating back to about the mid-1980s that really is the foundation of every family engagement study since that time. So for the past 35 plus years. And what it says is that family, school, and the community are the three entities that impact student outcomes outside of the students themselves. But what's important here is what's on the right-hand side of the slide. And if you're on your phone, I'll tell you what it says, that the experiences, beliefs, and practices of these three entities are what impact how closely they partner together. The very first day, I mentioned I had a story for you. The first day I started teaching in Baltimore City, before the kids came back, so it was just teachers there. I was teaching first grade. The other two first grade teachers came into my classroom and they were looking at my class list and telling me which kids were going to be behavior problems. So, not necessarily a great start, but that's what happened. So I started to freak out a little bit. And then one of the teachers said, Miss Hutchins, the kids are going to be a handful. They're probably going to drive you crazy, but at least you don't have to worry about the parents. You'll never see them because they just don't care. And that was within an hour of me walking into the school. And after my initial, panic attack, I remember thinking, that just doesn't make sense to me, that the parents don't care about their kids. Like that just can't be true. And when I started doing more research, starting my second and third year of teaching, that's when I really got into seeing the importance of FSCP. And as I started digging more into the research and theories like this, I realized that teacher who said that, her experiences and beliefs then led to the practices that she demonstrated with families. And she had more of a closed door classroom. My experience growing up, North Shore of Chicago, very different, where I had parents who, even if they weren't in the building, which they often weren't, they knew who my friends were, they made sure I did my homework, and they asked, even if they couldn't help me study for a test, they asked if I had a test. And so my experiences then led to my beliefs about how important it is. And then that impacted the practices that I implemented when I was a classroom teacher. I'm going to tell you one more story about this slide before I move on. As I mentioned, my former boss is Dr. Joyce Epstein, who is a guru in this topic. I'm so fortunate to have worked with her for so long. And she was a single parent with her one son, Paul. And she was rarely at his school events because she was busy traveling around the world talking about the importance of family, school, and community partnerships. So Paul's teachers would probably see that Joyce wasn't there and think, oh, she doesn't care. She can't even bother showing up, to the math night, for example. And obviously nothing could have been further from the truth. And so I tell that story to caution you to not make judgments based on just what you see on the surface, and to dig a little bit deeper when you're forming partnerships, to think through, well, what are my own experiences working with families that lead to your beliefs, that lead to your practices? And So, as you're working with your teams, as you're maybe doing some reflection later on, think about your current experiences and beliefs, and then think about how that's influencing your practices. Okay. Prefacing this, I am going to be coming back to this slide with my colleague Milka Hawk in week 6, so the very last week of this ECHO series. So this is sort of a preview of that. And this slide talks about the gold standard, the ideal of what you are looking for when it comes to again, I'm going to say the 3 S's again, a sustainable, scalable, systemic partnership structure in your school or in your district. This is what we're shooting for. So again, 40 years plus of qualitative and quantitative research has shown that partnership programs are most successful in schools when you follow these 4 components that are in blue. So you have some sort of framework that you follow, you share leadership, you action plan, and you evaluate. So this is what we're ultimately shooting for. Within the framework on the slide are listed the 6 national standards for family school partnerships. So the national standards were written into Colorado legislation with Senate Bill 0990. And it says at the state level, we need to align our work with these national standards. Schools and districts do not need to adopt them in the way that you work. However, many schools and districts do, just because it aligns with the resources that we distribute from CDE. And really all that they are ways to categorize and sort of bucket the activities and initiatives that you are doing for family, school, and community partnerships. So that's really all it is to make sure that you are having this broader structure and comprehensive structure, that you're customizing it, that it's comprehensive and continually improved. Now, let me say, given that we know that this is where we ultimately want to go, is you have a framework, share leadership, you plan, and you evaluate. It is so critical that you recognize your own sphere of influence, whatever hat you are wearing here today, whether it's as a classroom teacher, a principal, a superintendent, a school psychologist or counselor, family engagement liaison. You have your own direct locus of control, your sphere of influence. So I encourage you to think through, what can you individually do to communicate effectively with partners, to share power with partners? Because regardless of what hat you are wearing here today, you can move the needle towards this more school-wide partnership program. The last week is when week 6 of the ECHO series is when Milka and I are going to be talking more about teaming, so sharing leadership, and action planning is going to be woven throughout. So I know a lot of you are probably really anxious to hear, just tell me what to do. Like, what are the highest impact strategies that can really just, help students succeed more? We will get to that. And let me also, before I get too far into my favorite slide is the next slide. It's not this one. Though this is a good one too. During weeks 2 through 5 of this ECHO series, you will be hearing more in depth about some of these specific activities that you will see on the next slide, my favorite slide. This is a preface to what I'm excited to share with you. So the Flamboyant Foundation in Washington, D.C. synthesized hundreds of research studies, which I believe Carla has in follow-up resources for you. And this is a summary of the research studies, which is that in order to really accelerate students' learning, that families should be able to play these 5 roles. And the 5 roles are communicating high expectations, monitoring their child's performance, supporting learning at home, guiding their child's education, and then advocating for their child. So when you think about, so this is a lot, right? And especially You know, when you think about the capacity that some families have to be able to do this, if they're working multiple jobs, if they're a single parent, if they have 4 or 5 kids at home, this is a lot to do. So what can schools do to really help build families' capacities to be able to navigate these 5 roles? This is where we get to my favorite slide. So this is a continuum of impact. A lot of schools begin with the left-hand side of the slide. So with your activities, your celebrations, fundraisers, potlucks, performances. These are not bad things to do. So please, if you hear anything from today, know those are not bad things to do. However, I'm going to quote one of my district contacts in Jeffco Public Schools. She was on a panel of a session that I hosted 2 weeks ago today, actually. And she said, events don't change student achievement. So when you look at the left-hand side of this slide, your fundraisers, your potlucks, those are fun. Those can help to build relationships. However, they will not move the needle to student achievement directly. It's more indirectly. If you want to really help families to navigate those 5 roles, to have the capacity, you want to focus on the right-hand side of the slide, which is relationship building, academic partnering, doing positive, proactive home visits, so not punitive home visits, making phone calls home, positive phone calls home. So these are more of the individual outreach to how you can really directly impact student achievement through family, school, and community partnerships. And I absolutely agree. If you feed them, provide laundry machines, they absolutely will come, providing transportation. And I will say, going back, let's see, Chris, going back to what you said in the chat, if you tack on a student performance, and I experienced this when I was teaching, and I facilitated monthly literacy nights at the elementary school. When we had student performances and childcare and food, that is what brought the families into the building. And again, we were able to provide families with strategies of how they could support their children's learning at home. So those are absolutely good ways to begin the relationships. So I have about 5 minutes left. I'm doing the math here. So I'm gonna need about 2 minutes for the next slide before we go into our breakout rooms. So let me pause just for a second and have you write in the chat, looking at this slide of the continuum of impact, do you have did any light bulbs go off, or have you tried any of these activities with any success? I should say activities or initiatives with any success. Let me just pause for a second. And I have the worst wait time. I'm so impatient. Like the worst. Relationships are key, absolutely. Danielle, I'm glad you put that in the chat because it actually reminded me of something I wanted to say and didn't. One of the greatest challenges that I experience going out and working with schools and districts is needing to shift mindsets. So oftentimes people, think that family engagement, that it just happens, and that it doesn't need to be planful or intentional. I often hear sometimes, I run into parents in the grocery store all the time. So that's family engagement. Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with running into a parent in the grocery store. And that happens, in small towns for sure. But is that going to lead to positive student outcomes? It could be the beginning of relationship building. But again, you really want to focus in on, your positive phone calls home, regular personalized communication. So one of my DU colleagues, so a different hat that I wear, Dr. Rashina Banerjee, she said in a meeting that we had that family, school, and community partnerships are really focused on soft skills. So again, more of those relational things. So they're focused on soft skills that are based on hard facts. And one of the things I'm constantly running up against is, again, people not necessarily realizing that there's over 55, wait, hold on, I'm a decade behind, over 65 years of research that really show how important FSCP is for positive student outcomes. And I'm seeing questions and things in the chat. I'm going to scroll through the chat and see what you wrote when you're all in your breakout sessions, because I want to make sure that I stick to time. But thank you so much, everybody, for adding those in the chat. So I want to just preface what we're going to be talking about in your breakout rooms. And this slide comes from this book, Beyond the Bake Sale. It has a 2007 publication date. Don't turn your nose up at that. The only really outdated things in this book are mentions of No Child Left Behind instead of the Every Student Succeeds Act. But this book has really great examples of, again, systemic partnerships, and it's very practitioner friendly in terms of there's lots of checklists and inventories and things like that. The third chapter of this book says, ready, set, go. How do you know if you're really open for partnerships? I'm going to read a section of the chapter. So it says, before we can create strong and effective partnerships with families, we have to believe not only that it's important, but also that it can be done and that we can do it. That means it's necessary for school staff to hold a set of positive beliefs about family engagement. From our conversations with district leaders, principals, teachers, and other school staff, we have identified 4 core components that serve as the foundation for the work of engaging families. All right, so that is the preface for these 4 core beliefs. So these are the 4 core beliefs that the 4 authors of this text found in all of their conversations with school and district staff are necessary in order to know, like, are we ready for partnerships? What are our beliefs around this work? So all parents have dreams for their children and want what's best for them. All parents have the capacity to support their children's learning. Parents and school staff should be equal partners. And the responsibility for building, I'm going to emphasize that word, for building partnerships between school and home rests primarily with school staff, especially the school leaders. So those are the 4 core beliefs that you are going to be discussing in your small groups. And with that, I am going to stop sharing so that we can actually go into those small groups to discuss.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Hutchins. Everybody, let's give her a warm, is it warm? What? Thank you for an awesome presentation. So much rich information there. And we're actually going, as Carla was explaining earlier, we have a little bit of a different structure. So what we're going to do right now is spend some time for questions. We've got Darcy right here. So if you all have any questions before going to our breakout rooms, this is the time to do it. So if you have a question, put it in the chat. I know somebody asked earlier, how do you begin?
Perfect. So I'm glad we're doing this. So how do you begin building those relationships? And I'm so glad. I can't see who asked it. All I see is Moffat.
Virginia
Drake. Virginia. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to pass along advice that my former boss gave to me before coming out here to Colorado. So before Stephanie came on into my office in October of last year, so it's very recent, I was solo. It was me by myself in my office trying to work with 178 school districts. And it was really overwhelming. And so when I was leaving Baltimore to move out to Denver, the parting words of advice that Joyce gave me were start with the readiest districts. And when you start with districts that are ready to partner, then I could, focus my energy there, get some momentum to then have it really, snowball and just grow from there. So my advice would be to begin building those relationships. First of all, start with the readiest families. If you're a principal, start with the readiest teachers who are ready to partner, because that way you will see the benefit of partnering with families. And Dr. Kathy Hoover-Dempsey from Vanderbilt, she's now retired, but she did research studies about efficacy around family engagement. And what she found is that when teachers believe that FSCP is important, then they're more likely to reach out to work with families. When they see the reciprocation of that, then they're like, oh, wow, I'm going to try some different strategies to reach out to families who may not always be in the building. And so they try the strategies like making a phone call home, getting to know the names of their students' siblings to show that they care. That goes such a long way with building those relationships. And then the teachers in the study just kept gaining more and more confidence around working with families. So that's the researchy side of things. In terms of actual practices, honestly, the simplest ideas to begin building relationships are often the best ideas. Simple does not mean easy, but simple in terms of, again, an email home, a positive phone call home, doing a home visit, having that personalized communication. One of the best things I did as a teacher was make sure that I knew my students' parents' last names, which most of the time was not the same last name as the students. That little thing showed the parents that I cared about them. So those were recommendations from my experience. Was there something more? Modeling learning. So that's, how long do I have here? I could go on and on, Sandra. Just cut me off.
Okay, how about you share my screen when it's time?
Okay, that sounds good.
These are great questions, though. This is wonderful.
So say a bit more about modeling learning supports. I will give an example actually from the Promising Partnership Practices. So since 2015 at CDE, we've been collecting promising practices from P through 20, preschool through higher ed, in what schools are doing to partner with families. And the best example that I've seen in terms of modeling learning supports came from Vaughn Elementary School in Aurora Public Schools. And they had, I forget the name, Vaughn Family Math, something or other. I can find the link and put it in the chat. And so parents were invited to come into the classroom to watch how the classroom teacher taught a math lesson. And after they saw how to do the new math, even though I don't know if we can call it new math anymore because it's been around for a while, but parents were able to see how the teacher was teaching math, and then they could model that learning strategy to be able to help with learning at home. I know some of you may be thinking, well, our parents are working during the day. They can't do that. You could do something similar in the evening. Or, in an after-school program, potentially in a home visit, going to the families and teaching it. But the Vaughn Elementary School is the best example I've seen of modeling learning strategies. What you do when teachers already feel overwhelmed. I fully get that. And that, I think, now more than ever is one of the biggest challenges. I'm going to go back to one of the phrases that I had on the slide that said, ask me about FSCP at the very beginning. It said, be realistically optimistic. So my recommendation would be honest about your starting points and the capacity that the teachers have. And then, but don't use that as a reason not to try to partner, but start small. Again, it could be one home visit, 2 phone calls home over the course of a week. One last thing, Sandra, and then I'm going to stop. But with that question, for anybody who's here as a superintendent or as a principal or in some other leadership capacity, allowing classroom teachers time during the day to make those phone calls home, even if you know a parent won't be able to answer, leave a voicemail message. And that goes such a long way. So leaders can really support teachers who are feeling overwhelmed. And I know principals are overwhelmed too. I know that, but that's something that you could do. And again, I could talk about this forever, but I'm not going to.
For more information about Project ECHO and upcoming ECHOs with the University of Denver, please visit mortgage.du.edu/ECHO or follow us on Twitter at ECHO_DU_MCE. Thanks for watching.